So here we are in 2025. It's been 5 years since the iPhone 12 Pro Max originally released, and now with iOS 26, you could say that it's had a pretty major overhaul to its original software. But honestly, this phone has aged in a really interesting way with the changes to its software and just how it holds up today. Overall, things are both surprisingly good, but also a little messy. So let's break it down. Hi, welcome to the TC. My name's David, and today we're going to be taking a look at the iPhone 12 Pro Max in 2025. How does it hold up now with iOS 26? First, let's rewind and look back at some of the major changes and features of the iPhone 12 Pro Max at launch. The 12 Pro Max was Apple's big, shiny new iPhone back in 2020. The biggest screen ever on an iPhone at 6.7 inches, flat sides finally made a comeback, while the MagSafe name got reintroduced to the iPhone, ceramic shield made the display tougher for the first time, and Pacific Blue was a color that everyone flexed online. This was also the first iPhone with sensor shift stabilization, so yeah, your photos were even steadier, even if your hands were not. And for the video people, Apple rolled out Dolby Vision HDR recording, which is honestly overkill in 2020, but still makes this phone a large contributor to the eye-searingly bright content you see on our TikToks and Instagram Reels. Thanks, HDR. It also launched with 5G, which back then was just mostly a battery-eating network capability. Now that it's had time to mature and grow though in some areas, in 2025, it's actually useful, but we'll come back to that. So if you're watching this, you're likely curious how the iPhone 12 Pro Max handles iOS 26 over iOS 18. And through my experience in using it, I have a couple thoughts. iOS 18 was the last version that felt normal on this phone. Smooth, familiar, reliable. But then Apple went ahead and released iOS 26 with its new liquid glass inspired design. This whole liquid glass look is honestly like if Apple merged iOS with a lava lamp. Some people love it and some people hate it. I honestly don't mind it. I like that there has been a shakeup in the design, but there's also some areas that are pretty similar to the iOS 18 in its design as well. Performance though, it's not bad overall actually, but this is where its age does seem to show. Every once in a while the phone will stutter, like it's saying, "Hey buddy, I'm old, cut me some slack." It's not deal breaking, but if you're still rocking a 12 Pro Max, just know that iOS 26 is not as smooth as 18 was. Also, bugs. Lots of little ones. If you haven't updated yet, maybe you might want to wait for 26.1 to iron them out. Okay, but what is it like to actually use this phone in 2025? Well, it's surprisingly solid. Now, obviously the cameras aren't flagship level anymore, but they're far from bad. Night shots will still hold up thanks to its bigger sensor, and ProRAW is still a lifesaver if you like editing photos or retaining more detail. It's still a 12 megapixel sensor on all the rear cameras, with the addition of LiDAR for the first time, which definitely helped it focus better in low light, as well as allowing for some nifty features for measuring. For the first time also, like I mentioned earlier, they also added sensor shift stabilization. This means that the sensor itself is doing the stabilization instead of the lens, which allows it to make corrections much faster since the sensor is still quite a bit lighter over the entire lens assembly. This means that you get a better correction for shakes and vibrations. However, this was only added to the 12 Pro Max, where this feature would eventually trickle down to other models with the 13 series next year. Also, there is a night mode across all the cameras finally, allowing for a lot better nighttime shots if you're using the ultrawide for example. For the first time also, since the iPhone 7 Plus, there was also a major change to the zoom capability with a new telephoto lens allowing for 2.5x times zoom. This doesn't sound like much because it really wasn't a huge change, but it did allow for slightly more zoom and for more classic portrait focal length equivalents with the telephoto. But do keep in mind this was only on the 12 Pro Max series, so if you had a 12 Pro, it was still the 2x lens. They also added that Dolby Vision HDR for video mode, and this definitely makes video more vibrant, but it can sometimes not play nice with online content. So that's just something to keep in mind if you like to post online a lot. Now, as for battery does leave a little bit to be desired. Mine's degraded over the years, of course, but even when it was new, this wasn't exactly a super long-lasting phone since 5G would eat a considerable amount of battery. You can get the battery replaced, and given the age of these devices, it's likely that they will need a new battery. However, it is something to consider pouring money into a 5-year-old smartphone that just has 2 major software updates left. Ultimately, you have to decide whether you want to pay $100 for a new battery or use that money towards a newer phone that provides longer battery life than this phone, even with a new battery. On the bright side, MagSafe still feels futuristic, and accessories have only gotten better since 2020. You could easily swap it on the charger every night like clockwork, and it typically can be good enough for a little over half a day before needing to be topped up. Perfectly fine though if you charge your phone while driving to and from work like most people do. As for the other features of the iPhone 12 Pro Max, the display is quite large. 6.7 inches was a new change from the 6.5 of the previous Pro Max, likely brought upon due to the new flat design allowing for more room for a larger display too. It's not as bright as later iPhones though, which can present itself as an issue in brighter situations, such as the fully sunny day. And also being only 60Hz is a pretty big bummer. This was finally changed for the 13 Pro Max just a year later, bringing 120Hz promotion to the iPhone for the first time. As for performance, you do have the A14 Bionic and 6GB of RAM. Now this was a pretty good spec phone for the time, especially the CPU. It has a total of 6 cores for the CPU, 2 being for performance and 4 for efficiency, along with a 4-core GPU and 16 neural engine cores, double what the 11 Pro Max had. It's enough for your usual daily tasks, but it isn't as quick as your latest smartphone, which is to be expected. Just because it's older though, doesn't mean that you can't use it. Pretty much all the flagship phones from this decade still hold up really well today. The biggest setback would probably be the 6GB of RAM though. Overall, the usability of this phone is still pretty good, and if you respect the fact that it is a 5-year-old phone now, then I think that you can adjust your expectations to be a little more lenient as to how fast it is versus something like a brand new iPhone. I could switch to this phone being my daily and not really feel like it hinders my ability to do the things I need out of my phone the most. Really, I think that the biggest problem is honestly going to be the battery life because it is an older phone, and from the beginning it didn't really have that great of a battery life compared to phones today. So honestly though, I think that's something that you could probably easily and cheaply mitigate by using a MagSafe battery bank. So here's the real question. Is the iPhone 12 Pro Max still worth it in 2025? I think that if you already own this phone and you don't really mind the occasional stutter or bug, then honestly, there really isn't a huge reason to upgrade unless you want something like better cameras, better battery life, and just overall just a nicer experience. But that doesn't mean that this phone has a bad experience either. It's still a pretty usable phone today, and I don't think that most people would have any problem using this phone at all. I do think though, if you are looking to buy this phone secondhand, you may want to pump the brakes on that. The price gap between this and something like an iPhone 14 really isn't that big, and having a phone that's 2 years newer definitely should give you a boost in battery life as well as just having better specs. And if you want a Pro iPhone, honestly, I think the 15 or even the 14 Pro offer a pretty compelling value for the price that you're paying. If you don't really care about the Apple Intelligence stuff, then you can save quite a bit of money just going with a 14 Pro instead. But honestly, for a 5-year-old iPhone, this phone handles iOS 26 a lot better than I was expecting. I think that though, for most people looking at buying an iPhone today, the best price for what you're getting in terms of like if you want a new iPhone is honestly going to be that base model iPhone 17. You get pretty much a lot of the Pro features that we had last year in a package that's both lighter and has a feature set of the actual 17 Pro, such as the new front-facing camera or the 48 megapixel ultra-wide. And honestly, I think that's the most compelling iPhone 17 out there. That base model is actually a really good deal, especially since you get 256GB of storage now. So to wrap things up, I do think that the iPhone 12 Pro Max is still a pretty good phone in 2025. You're not going to get the flashiest features, and it might not have the best performance, especially with a 60Hz screen. However, I do think that this phone does hold up pretty well after the 5 years. If you're looking at buying a new iPhone though, I really do think that the iPhone 17 is probably going to be your best bet. If you are looking at a more budget-oriented iPhone, I would definitely give the 14 Pro series a look. So do any of you guys still use an iPhone 12 Pro Max or even a 12 Pro? I'd love to hear about that in the comments down below and your experience in using it, especially with iOS 26. Don't forget to like this video, comment, and subscribe down below to see more videos just like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.